it looks like I'm probably gonna be flopping right back and being a vampire again though. So I'm not even gonna be awake.
Is that not working, Mike?
Yeah, I'm not getting. It's coming through as no signal for my camera. Unless I need to withdraw one of these ports. Oh, that's true. Change.
It's this one.
Oh, there we go. Get Ben in.
Hey, Mike.
Which is the microphone, which is not. You'll have to have your microphone.
Yeah.
Feedback.
You don't got it.
No. You're able to hear me, Ben?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm not hearing you, so that's
Okay, it might be.
looks like you're unmuted, but I'm not getting any sound on my end. So let me see what I can
Okay.
come up with.
Kelly, can you hear me?
Yep. All right. Agenda as well. Yeah, it's the proposed agenda for next week. Discussion. Those yours you printed out?
Yours?
Okay.
Yes.
I just have a pile of them. I'm like, are these also mine that got split out, or did you bring them with?
I didn't bring it.
Okay, so they must have been more of them I brought. You already joined once. Joining twice.
Oh, that's good.
I got you in twice now. Want me to kick you out?
You can do whatever.
Well, as long as you're muted, that's okay. Do you have any way of contacting Sal? Because we knew we weren't going to have Adrian, but Sal was going to be here.
No.
Well, I guess 302 would be too pushy yet. But CC'd on the email from talked to Christian today, and I mentioned because Turtle Island's requested Green Mountain Transit.
Mhm.
He's on the Green Mountain Transit Board, so I talked to Christian, so I let him know that there's an interest in having adjustments to the bus route to
So,
do that. He sent an email which you've been CC'd on, would have gotten it a couple minutes ago. So that's why that came up. It's because I had
that's awesome.
run into him, so we'll see what he's got to contact them. They've got their route developer people who will take a look at. They want to first take a look at how much current traffic bus use is generated at the current site. So that way they could then go and transpose to determine whether or not a new route out there would be warranted.
Yeah.
You folks have Sal's number?
Yeah, one of them, I'm gonna see if I can grab it from.
I have it. I have it. I can give him a ring.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yep.
One of those things that I not have all of them. So in my phone.
Oh, the counselors, yeah.
I should do that. But yeah.
Oh, yes.
I feel like I gotta go through this like checklist of things. I'm just make sure I'm ready to really fully do this.
Yeah, in case there's a emergency management tree that has to get run through, you've got everyone's phone number on quick dial.
And I saw him yesterday. He did mention that he's gonna be here.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in conversation. Any luck getting in touch with him?
Called him twice and sent a text. So
Oh, Bill Fraser. Oh, maybe the surprisingly nice weather today. It's supposed to rain,
Oh.
so
Sal says that he's having trouble logging in, but he'll be there in just a minute.
Huh.
Maybe like a Zoom update or something. I guess this means that we could determine him as subcommittee chair. Before he gets here.
sufficient penalty for lateness.
Yes. Sal's just switching to his tablet. So he's working to figure it out.
Plan B.
Technology. The best.
Making sure we were easy to find. There you
Sorry,
are.
I have no idea.
Oh, good. How are you, Sal?
Okay, now. Gotta love technology.
Yeah, we've
Oh,
all
now,
been.
now my computer's.
So who's running this meeting?
Not I, said Gus the Goose.
I'm like kind of serious. Is this one? Is
Yeah, I
this
guess
one
it's
that
true.
like? Is this something that you expect us to take the lead on, or are you going to facilitate this meeting? It's either way is fine. Just want to know.
I can facilitate it. I don't know if technically we're supposed to to have a subcommittee chair, which we would probably need for next week at least. But I mean, I can facilitate this meeting and call it to order. And we don't need to do the Zoom procedures, which would take us to determining the subcommittee chair, which I think is just for technical reasons. So
Yeah.
someone does.
Sal, how would you feel about being subcommittee chair? Just for
Sure.
technical reasons.
Why not?
Great. Do we need to vote on that, or just we could just say Sal's the subcommittee chair?
Without what is the phrase? Without opposition, I will consider Sal.
Yeah.
Without objection, yeah.
Without objections, I
Great.
will
Thank you for your leadership, Sal.
have Sal appointed as the subcommittee chair. Without objection, I'll approve the agenda. All right, and general business, we don't have anyone here from the public, so we can just jump right into the discussion of the agenda. And so I guess I'll kick it off to the point that we did receive a draft agenda of what we thought could happen next week. And each of you has kind of provided some comments and input as what you thought or what you wanted to have resolved. I guess the outcome of today's meeting in my mind would be just that we have a general understanding of where and how we expect next Friday's meeting to operate. And that would be my expectation coming out of this meeting, is we kind of know what we want, who needs to be invited, who's doing the inviting, and so forth.
Yeah, that seems about right to me. Ben, is that your understanding? Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, my goal is like real clarity about what is the outcome of the meeting on Friday, right? And what is the information we would need to try to achieve that outcome, and who could provide that information if needed. I mean, actually, the way I'm thinking about this is like when I looked at VHCB's proposed scope of services, that document, where it says task 3.0, VHB will develop a final conceptual master plan. The deliverable for this task will be a hand-drawn 2D color rendered graphic with an existing conditions overlay. This plan can then be utilized by the city for inclusion with the TIF and growth center applications. I mean, I guess so I'm curious, is that the work product that we are hoping for at the end of, the subcommittee? When the subcommittee's work is done, will that be sufficient for what our goals are?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Mike's comments were very helpful in response to my questions. I mean, I've always been confused by the amount of the detail that's required at this stage, and what part of the confusion came from the actionable plans. Many comments in the actionable plan saying this is preliminary, it's just the beginning, there's lots of planning left. And then some very pointed remarks in for example, the growth center amendment application, where it said, we're going to build this kind of structure in this place. And I thought, gee, have we really planned to the extent that, we can say that? So if this is a placeholder, then I think I'm happy with it. But if we have to, is there going to be a phase 2 beyond what we do next week? Is there going to be a phase 2 where we have VHB's final draft of the work that they did, which is they've done like a complete LiDAR of the site, and they've done estimates of infrastructure costs and so on. But do we need a phase? I don't think we need a phase 2 for the growth center, but we need a phase 2 for the RFP, I would think. But I mean, one of my main goals is today or next week is to talk about where recreation goes on the site. If we're going to submit something that we use as a kind of a map for where things in general go, I'd like to at least have a discussion about about changing the boundary of the rec area in whatever we submit as a concept plan with the amendment application.
So, Sal, like what I totally hear, and like next Friday, we'll have a conversation about the concept plan, have a conversation about where is the best place for recreation, where do we think the best place for the housing, at least initially, is. But I guess what my question is, and maybe Mike, this is really the only question you can answer, is like, again, looking at the end product at the deliverable from VHB at the end of this subcommittee's work would be, a 2D color rendering graphic with an existing conditions overlay. This plan can then be utilized by the city for inclusion with the TIF and growth center applications. That does not feel, Sal, like the second phase of planning that you were talking about. It feels like a revised conceptual plan that could be approved or adopted. I can't remember which is the one we want to do, of the conceptual plan that can then move forward for the growth center designation application. And I believe maybe begin the TIF work. At some point, the planning that you're talking about, Sal, has to be done by someone. at some point in this process. But my question is, does it have to be completed before we're able to adopt or accept a conceptual plan that VHCB would help us revise? Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm hoping that it doesn't have to be done before we can accept it, because that will take more time, and if it's really not necessary now, I just want to make sure it's possible later, that we're not locking in anything that
Right.
we haven't really officially agreed upon. Where are you? The document you're referring to, what is it that you're?
I'm looking at this is a project description, proposed scope of work of services from VHB that Mike emailed us.
For
Maybe, I
VHB,
don't know, Mike, maybe
okay.
like a week ago or something. And it's, I think it was just a proposal. It was really after we put forward the kind of proposed agenda, then we got the scope of work from VHB, and it's the project kickoff where we, have our meeting on Friday. They, based upon that feedback, come up with a conceptual plan, bring it back to us for our review. But, really what they're proposing is at the end of this mini process that we will have the revised conceptual plan that we can bring back to the full council and make a recommendation and be like, hey, whether it's concept A, B, C, or D, like this is the concept. And I just want to make sure before we, as we think about our meeting on Friday, how we want that meeting to go, who we want to invite, that like we're all in agreement about what an acceptable end product looks like, and if it's sufficient to address the concerns that you and other counselors have raised, or that we've all kind of raised.
Mm-hmm. So this would be work that VHB would, and I'm sorry, I may have missed that note from you, Mike. I don't recall seeing that document, but I mean, I know we've got a contract with VHB to estimate infrastructure work, and I know they were proposing something additional for this process, and I assume that's what the email was about.
Yeah.
And yes, I think I agree with what you're saying, Ben. That would be the outcome that that I'd be looking for after the end of next week. The question is, who else do we need, if anyone, in that meeting to accomplish that?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot too, and like, obviously we'll have Mike's expertise, but my understanding is Mike Willard from VHB is going to be able to walk us through all the kind of work that's been done before. I mean, I think really what we need to understand, and most importantly, are the site constraints that have already been identified, right? Of like, before we start moving things around, we need to know like what the guardrails are in the realm of the possible based on like site limitations. And I would think that Mike Willard and Mike Miller could like walk us through that and then say, you could do this, or you could do this, you could do this, or you could do this. Right. And I mean, I'm going to be really frank or honest that like, I worry about my own lack of expertise in being able to make those kinds of decisions. But I think if we can hear from Mike Miller, Mike Willard, and other, potentially other people about the pros and cons, then I think we can, try to make a recommendation to the full council. But I guess I'm thinking like the kinds of people that would help me make those kinds of decisions, I think are professional planners, like, whether it's I don't know, like, but I welcome feedback here, but I'm thinking like Christian Meyer, if he's interested in doing that, or are there other professional planners in our community? Like, I have not asked them this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Like people like Richard Morey or Kate McCarthy, or, people who are professional planners who could help us think about these kinds of things. Or, frankly, Mike, I would look to you to be like, do you think that there are people that it would be helpful for us to hear from to make kind of informed decisions about this kind of thing? Because I feel like we have a ton of public input, right? And, but if we're going to open this up, we need to understand what the choices are and how we should approach those choices.
Yeah, so I guess the input I would have is I would expect if we're doing anything with the recreation bubble, that we would want to have the. Oh, you're trying to get in this way as well, Sal?
I am,
All right,
because I'm having trouble hearing folks.
okay.
Um,
I'll admit you, but then remember to make sure you turn off the microphone on one of them. Or
Yeah,
one has
I'll just,
feedback.
I'll just get out of the one on the tablet. If I'm in, yeah. Okay, I will.
How's
How's
that?
that? I got an echo.
Yeah, you're still on your tablet.
How about now?
All right. Well, I'm not hearing the echo. You're still on my screen for the tablet, but that's okay. You're frozen.
You're frozen. You're good. You're good, Sal.
I was just mentioning that the process for I gotta remember where I was.
Process for community services.
Oh, having community services. So yeah, if we're gonna adjust and impact that recreation zone, that we should probably have them come in and give their input, because my conversations with them in the interim has been that they're satisfied, happy just where they are, and they're not really interested in that type of shift. If there's a proposal to expand or to exchange land, to go through and say, well, the housing should take this part, maybe the housing takes the parking lot and we get a little bit more of the flat field and back, or something like that. That there's an interest in that type of conversation. But for the most part, they've put a lot of effort into their own plan development to lay out, and they've invested in that area, the feast farm and the gardens and stuff. And so there's a lot of stuff that they would rather not have to go and remove around to another location. So if we are going to make adjustments, I think that would be a logical one to make sure we bring it in and have their input on.
Well, I think I agree. And we talked to them. I don't know why I have two screens here, but
You're good.
yeah. I spoke with them at the meeting and told them that if we had that discussion, that they would be a part of it. So I think it makes sense for them to be there. Because I really haven't seen their full plan there, and I've seen certain versions of it, but like I don't know what their plans are for the feast farm and that sort of thing. I assume those are short-term things, so that could be altered. I mean, the feast part could be moved, or so I would like to hear them and have them part of the discussion. It just makes sense to me, because I am actually proposing that we shift a part of what is now defined as recreation, the most northerly part, that we shift it westward to provide better use of what is a flat area, and use the uphill area for housing. And I guess it affects where the initial housing would go, is the other question I have, because I know that we want to start housing with I guess we haven't decided what we want to start with, but one notion is that we would start with a multi-unit structures, and the question is, where do we do that? What's the effect on infrastructure and so on? We're making the entry from the infrastructure that comes up the hill to the infrastructure that actually goes into the site, and we need to have enough housing to make sense out of the TIFs. So I don't know how that relationship of what I'm looking for affects that. And it seemed to me, Mike, that was part of what the application was saying, is that we needed to balance those things to make sure that the actual development of the housing kept up with the TIF predictions, the projections for the funding of the infrastructure. So, but I think the work VHB does probably answers most of those questions in whatever they would prepare.
Yeah, so I guess taking a half step back to the earlier question of, are we going to eventually be developing a concept plan 2.0? That really comes back to the council's prerogative and what you want to see as the outcome coming out of the process. And I think I've mentioned this, and I put it in the email. I don't know if you guys have had the chance to go and look through all the stuff I've sent back for Adrian's questions, but some of this comes back to the question of when the plan was developed, there was an assumption that we were going to be kind of leading the development process. And so that would have meant we're laying out, and we actually just got an example today from the town of Dorset of how they have a similar process to ours, and they laid out the roads and said, this is where single family homes are, this is where the duplexes are, this is where the multifamily are. And so they're doing a process where they've gone through and detailed where these are all going. And that was similar to the intent of how the White and Burke process was envisioning we would be going, is to kind of have doing a lot of that next level analysis and putting things on ground, and then asking developers who wants to go and build this out. And what happened after 23 and discussions with council was that council was like, we should not be in the business of developing. We really should leave this as open as possible to developers. So in that case, a lot of phase 2 development is going to be really the outcome of what comes out of the RFP process. So we're going to be leaving a lot of those secondary design. Now we can always reconsider that decision and say, let's take a step back and say, we do want to have more of a role in how this gets laid out and designed. But that's really a decision on your end. Do you want to put a template out there for developers to say, this is what we want to see, or something like this? Or do we really want to say, we've got a road that comes up, we know the road has to get out there, this is kind of how the road goes, we need in this area, and I think I sent it in an email last night, I was like, this new concept plan could have just a lot of qualifiers on it. Approximate road location, may vary depending on based on developers' interests. All roads shall be constructed to complete street standards. Development area A, this is high development area A. We will be looking for at least 200 housing units in this area. And this area will be lower density housing to be determined by a developer with these expectations, and not being as specific as saying these are townhomes, these are 5 80-unit buildings, and we might not even need to put boxes on there. That's a question for VHB. How would you guys turn these words into images so that way it conveys to the public and to the developers, this is what we want, but don't get hung up on that's where you said the road was going to be. But it also then helps us say, this is the recreation zone. The road has to be over here because we've already allocated this, or this area, whatever the revised area is. And that's where, if I were giving you advice, that's where I would say, I think that's where you want to get to, because I don't think you want the specifics, because you don't want to get locked in. But at the same time, we need enough to say, there's going to be roads here. I can then calculate, this is plus or minus 100 feet, 1,200 feet of road, or whatever it is. And then I can use that to start to develop the TIF questions, because eventually council is going to start saying, is this a viable project? It's like, well, with 1,200 feet of road and 200 housing units, yes. But in the email to Adrian, I also explained, if you do high-end housing, you could do less. If you do affordable housing, you might need to do more, because we just need to have value numbers.
Well, it's occurring to me that we might need to have a sort of preliminary round with at least a developer who could help us decide some sort of generalities, like, does it make sense for a road to go here versus there? I mean, if we were to go the Dorset route, then I'm thinking about all the people that Ben talked to. I mean, I'm not equipped, to do the level of planning, but I am equipped to listen to people who have that kind of expertise, and we would need a process that invites all those people, and we could come up with a specific plan. I don't think that's what we decided to do. I'm not sure it's what we needed to do. On the other hand, I worry that if we are too fuzzy on what we want, or maybe what we don't want, or where we want recreation and where we want, other stuff, then the developers will do what they will convince us to do what they want to do, so maybe. And I don't know if maybe VHB maybe they have the enough expertise in this, at this phase of things, to be able to help us with questions like, does it make sense to put a road here, or to start the infrastructure in this direction instead of that? Those are big broad questions that I'm not capable of answering. What attracted my attention to this, Mike, was thinking of the conceptual plan as very preliminary, and then reading language in the application that said, there won't be any single family housing on this site, and there'll be 5-story buildings here in this lower area, and multi townhomes in this other area of the site. And I didn't think that we had come to that level of specificity. And I would rather not be at that level of specificity here. I'd rather just identify or redefine that. My goal is to make sure that we're defining the rec area in the right way, and what are the consequences of that for the road and the infrastructure and the housing. And I don't know that we're capable of answering all those questions on our own, but we need some sort of help with it. Yeah, Ben, you see?
Yeah, no, I think this is really helpful, Sal. Like, I think it strikes me what we need is a concept plan that does just a couple things that I think really clarifies the relationship between land for housing and land for recreation. Right. And then the concept plan, Mike, help me out here, but to me, it sounds like, is it possible to articulate our goals and values related to this parcel, i.e. maximize the amount of housing, different types of housing for different types of people, right? And provide just enough information in the concept plan to make for a successful growth center application and to get us started on the TIF. I mean, in other words, put in as little detail as possible, other than we know we want recreation here, therefore the road is going to go here. And when it comes to the housing, what is our goal with housing? I don't think anybody's goal here is to build a bunch of $1 million homes for people, right? Our goal is to have as much possible housing for different types of folks that can cash flow the infrastructure. And so if we keep it just we're not going to have 90 townhomes or 100 single family homes or five floors. If we just say, Mike, is this enough? I guess I'm asking, is this enough? Would that be enough information for the growth center application and for the TIF district? If we just said, we're looking for a developer to maximize the housing potential of this site.
With these constraints,
with these
knowing
constraints,
that
exactly.
We want to maximize recreation in a level area, and we want as much housing on the gently sloped area, that sort of thing. Would that be enough? That's the
question.
That's a
if
very
we
good
said
question.
This is where rec goes, this is where the road goes, and we want to maximize the housing, is that enough for what you need, Mike, to move forward?
I think with some details, some other details in there, because I think certain parts we might need to have. I don't know if there are requirements in there for, say, the number of stories or anything like that. I don't think so, because we've got other places that don't. So I'm trying to think, because there's so many programs out there. Some of them have certain requirements, but if there was a requirement that said, this area will have, minimum of, two could be between 2 and 5 stories, expected to have higher density housing in this area, with a target, you can say with a target of, or with a minimum of a certain number of units, just because, you know, like like I said in the email I sent, replied to you all, that was from Adrian. I had mentioned that's like, well, you know, that's why we've kind of focused on that number of 200 units in the lower area, because 200 units is enough to pay for all the infrastructure.
Right.
Including up and through. So if we've got that, we know so that's why we've kind of had this target of, can we hit 200 in the lower 8 acres, 10 acres for housing? Because if we can, then we're in good shape for the other parts going up. But if we're short, as long as we recognize that we're going to need a certain amount of development up top, then the idea is, the more conservative we are, then if bad stuff starts to happen, we're on a safe side of our equation. So if we're 20% short on our cost of our housing sales or something like that, or our appraisals, we're still in the good, because we've got a lot of buffer area to work with. And that's what we're trying to be, is as conservative as possible. And if we can get 200 housing units in these larger development, but rather than say 3 to 5 stories, we could just say, you know, these are expected to be multi-story buildings and not be specific to a number.
But Mike, like, yes to everything you just said. And I'm just thinking about, like, how do we get through the next step of, like, the concept that can be approved? And, like, to me, all the stuff, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like the stuff that you're talking about, like that level of granularity, is that necessary for the growth center application and to begin the TIF work, right? Because to me, I'm working on the assumption, and maybe I'm wrong, but the way I'm thinking about this is, we can put forward a concept that has general goals and values and, like, recreation here, road here, maximize housing here. But then we're sending it out to developers who are going to come back and be like, this is what we can really do. Right. And
Yes.
so you know, and maybe that's not the right approach, but that's how I've been kind of thinking about this. And so if that is in fact the correct approach, then I think, like, just really being general and not locking us into anything other than, like, the non-negotiables, like where the rec goes or where the road goes. Let's wait and see what they bring back to us. And Sal, I hear you when you say, like, if we do that, the developers are going to tell us and they're going to convince us. But, like,
But
that'll
no,
be up to us.
I don't really object to that. Even the recreation area may change when the developer comes in and says, well, you know, it'd be nice to preserve all this flat land, but we need at least this much
Yes.
to build a multi-story building at that
Right.
location. That's fine, but to assume that we're going to do it from the get-go doesn't make sense to me. I'd much rather be general about it and say, if we had our druthers. It's like when I used to, you know, homeowner would call me and say, we need an addition, okay? And we'd talk about what they want. And then I would say, great, but you can only do this. And we'd compromise. So I want to say, this is what we want. You know, we want to preserve as much of this recreation area, this flat land, because everything else in town floods, you know? So this is our last chance to preserve this part of this parcel, and then when we go to RFP and the developer comes in, we may hear from them that they need to alter that in some way. But I agree, if we can go in as general, non-specific a way as possible to get through this process of growth center and get started on the TIF, then it keeps things moving. And when we get to RFP, we start over again with what developers tell us we can actually accomplish.
So that's very helpful, because that helps with that first question you asked of, is there going to be a second round of design? And it was like, well, there are these 2 paths, you know,
Right.
we could do that or not. And it sounds like the answer is, let's not. Let's stick with the current path that we've been proposing.
Yeah, I think the council agreed that that's how it would go.
I think I mean, let's be real. I think there are I feel like we hear a lot of questions and people saying, oh, you have to do all this, you have to do all that. But, like, if that in fact is not the case, and we can move forward with the growth center designation and the TIF district, not having all of that done, but saying, you know, we're going to try to maximize housing on the site around these parameters. Like, if that is sufficient for moving this forward, I definitely think that's the direction we should go, because otherwise it's like we're spending a bunch of money on planning that might not even
Right.
be tied to reality of what a
Yeah.
developer is willing to do.
And so if I can add in one more thing, so we will try to get together that generalized memo, because we're still, as staff, hoping that we can approve that Country Club Road plan, understanding that was a step, but we'll have a revised map. And I think we can put with that a revised memo that outlines
Yes.
the differences that go through and say, we've recognized, we've accepted and approved this plan, with the recognition that we are leaving open the possibility of these things. We don't want to lock ourselves in because of X, Y, and Z. So like your comment on, maybe we have single family homes. The plan has said none. We're leaving open the possibility of that. And we can outline a number of these, and we could just qualify that at the bottom that says, and we reserve the right to review other factors as they come up throughout this plan development process. And we kind of leave it at that. But I think if we had a new concept plan that's more flexible, and we have a memo that helps you go through and say, we're adopting the plan, there are aspects in that plan that we have heartburn over. So here's a little bit of a memo that outlines our approach and our differences from that report.
So can we distinguish between what you're calling a concept plan and the map? The concept map. Are you talking about a different concept map as well?
I was talking about the same thing.
Same thing. Okay.
I would just, the only thing I would say, Mike, is like, I would not call it heartburn. I'd be like, good news. We're excited by, like, the potential of this site. We know that, like, we would prefer recreation to go here, the road to go here. And we look forward to working with developers to maximize the housing development for mixed income housing development on this site. Right. And like, I would feel great if that was the level of specificity we needed to provide, because it allows us to keep our options open and like work with developers without having to put up this vision that people like immediately react to with tempest in a teapot that's not even necessarily tied to reality of what's going to happen.
So if you give me 1 second to then follow up on that, this is actually very good. I'm very glad to hear this approach, and this is where we're going. And I say that because I had just a fortuitous encounter. I ran into somebody who's a major developer out of Burlington, does market rate housing, does mixed income housing projects. And I was able to have a conversation with him, and it was, and I talked about this process. He's like, every developer knows about Country Club Road. Every developer is waiting for this RFP to come out. So there are people out there, they're waiting. They want to get involved. His recommendation was he wanted to see this as flexible as possible. He was like, the less constraints we have going into it, the more we can make sure that our ability to meet our economic needs, to make our project pencil out, as well as meeting the community's needs, because they recognize this is on a municipal project, the better. And then I had to explain to him this difference. I was like, well, for us to get a growth center and a TIF, we need to have a certain amount of specificity to get those. But at the same time, we want to build in enough flexibility that we're not boxing in our potential partners. And so he was like, oh, I get it. You're in a tough position to try to balance that in the right spot where we have enough detail, but not too much detail. And so it sounds like you and me and developers are all trying to hit that same sweet spot. And I think we're just going to have to work our way through it. But I think the first step is to go through what we've got for next Friday. And I think that'll be, but I just wanted to mention that I have talked with a developer who was very excited about this idea and was understanding of our challenges.
Yeah.
And I think you can, I don't want to pretend like I know more about this than I do, but like you can see this in housing development, major housing development projects across Vermont, like Canby and Rise, like what that starts out looking like and what it ends up looking like is it's a long and winding road, right? And like, not literally, but like, it's just, I think having that flexibility is really important because none of this is going to pencil out without like really maximum flexibility. And I guess, can we just get back though to Friday and like what we need to achieve on Friday? Cause I feel like what I'm hearing then is maybe some emerging agreement that at the end of the meeting on Friday, if we have a revised concept plan, which is like a picture of rec fields, road, housing, maximize, but then like a memo that says, this is what we are trying to achieve with this concept, that would be a sufficient end product for us to bring back to the full council with a recommendation that they could approve, and then Mike could take it and use it for the growth center designation application and to begin the TIF. Is that accurate? Either in terms of like, did I summarize it
A little bit of
correctly?
what I was,
Or-
it's what I was
or on a
thinking. I was waiting to
practical
see
level.
what Sal thought.
Well,
Well-
one, is that in fact the consensus that I'm hearing? And two, would it actually work? So I guess Sal, do you feel comfortable with that? And Mike, would it work?
I do if we're going to submit a map,
Yeah,
a picture, an illustration of something. The current illustration troubles me because flat land is flat land. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I just want to make sure that we leave open the possibility that we can actually do with housing what we want to and need to do at Country Club Road, and at the same time preserve as much of the land that is already flat and not have to create flat land, which would be difficult and expensive. And I think that needs a new picture. And, going back through White and Burke, there are images that they used where the caption says, recreation or multifamily. And we kind of went the multifamily way. I'd like to go back and leave it open, leave the flat land open to recreation as long as we possibly can, and let the developers say, we can't leave it all open. We have to have, this chunk of it, or, I'd rather not make lock that decision in now in any way. And have to explain it later rather than the way it is now. So I am good as long as we can alter that map a little bit. And we
Oh,
can
yeah.
do that, based on next Friday can be, sort of a workshop for that.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's going to, VHB is going to bring us a lot of good information. Of course, we have a bunch of people, I say a bunch, I know of a few people who want to be they want to be notified when that meeting's taking place and want to participate.
so I think that's really
And that's
important to
For
talk.
input,
Yeah, I think that's really important to talk about. And like, well, first I just want to say like, that sounds great, Sal. Like, I think we're good, right?
Yeah.
But like, if we can talk about like meeting logistics a little bit, like it sounds like we have to, I'm assuming we're talking about Arnie from the rec. I don't know who from the community services or rec or whatever, but like that person needs to be a part of the conversation, right? We've got VHB coming. Are there others like specific people with expertise that should be invited to participate in the workshop? Or are we just like taking public comment? Or can anybody who shows up participate in this discussion? Like, I think I just really want to have clarity around like who's participating and how.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to take input because there are people in the community who know we're having this meeting and want to participate, and it's an open meeting.
Yeah,
and we need to, so we need to take their input. It does not mean that there's any authority attached to the input. It's input.
I totally agree. But I think that there's taking input from the public and, from anybody who wants to give input and listening to it. And then like experts like Mike Willard from VHB who are providing us professional expertise, right? And is Mike Willard enough in the professional expertise category, or is everybody's opinion treated equally in terms of like how much time they're given in the meeting? You know what I mean? Like,
the logistics will be tricky.
Yeah, if we had like 5 invited guests with particular professional expertise in this area that could help us think about these things, like a developer, a planner, regional planning commission,
Yeah,
whatever.
no, I like
You
that
know,
idea.
like those 5 people maybe participate in a conversation, a working group conversation that is different from asking, you know, public comment that comes from everybody. But maybe that's not necessary. I don't know. I'm like really I'm wrestling with this of like, how do we do this?
Well, I mean, are there people who we could invite who would actually attend? Do you think that, have you talked to anyone?
I have not officially, no.
Yeah, I haven't officially either. I know there are a lot of people who are interested, who have some expertise. I mean, we would need to separate the meeting into a couple of, to 2
Yeah.
parts. So there'd be sort of presentation and exchange of ideas early on, I would think, and then we would analyze and sift through that information and try to come up with our recommendation. I don't think we can exclude people, though. We can't say, okay, thank you. You have to leave now. I mean, we're gonna have to do all that in the same meeting, but we can certainly designate a certain time for input of ideas, and then a time when sort of a time for deliberation based on those ideas, because I think we want to come out with a decision at the end of the meeting, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to prolong it. I mean, have we ever had a meeting like that where people are encouraged to into a dialogue for like the first half of a meeting, and then it's like, thank you very much, we're now going to deliberate and not take additional comment?
I can't think of anything specific, but it's not that unusual to have a meeting of
Okay.
that type where you would either have a general public input or a an organized charrette type where people can participate and give ideas.
Yeah,
And then reach a point where it's like, well, it's open to the public, people can sit there, but we're not taking any more testimony. It's now up to the committee to sit down and decide how we're going to go and make this map and what information we want to say in this memo. So that way VHB has their marching orders to fulfill their side of the contract, which is to make us a conceptual plan. They'll draw that all up and bring it back to us in a week or a couple of days or whatever it is. And then you guys can look at it and say, yes, that's what we thought, or change these 3 words. This needs to get tweaked. And other than that, looks great. And then we're off to the 14th for our meeting. Yeah. With the full board.
well, we at this point, we have a week, so we would need to invite people who are already familiar with the project and the property, right? I mean, if we're gonna have, I don't think someone can just educate themselves based on what's presented on Friday. I think they need to have some context for it. Ben, you mentioned a number of people. Do they fit that bill? Are they aware of? Yeah, okay.
But I'm just kind of thinking about here, like, I don't want to be like exclusionary in any way, but I don't think that will be helpful in this process. So I'm wondering if it's just, I mean, we're just kind of like spitballing this to get it to a place, but I'm like, wonder if we just have maybe we just have public comment, right? Instead of limiting it to 3 minutes, maybe it's, 5 minutes. Right. And then if there are people like Sal, I think you and I both know, like, people in the community with specific expertise that are interested in this, like, we just invite them right to a regular public meeting and be like, hey, your point of view would be really welcome at this public meeting, and anybody can provide their
And
point
we
of view at the
can,
public meeting.
and we can actually play it by ear as to how much time we provide. I mean, if a horde of people arrive, we'll have to limit it more. If it's a handful, we can give people more time. I mean, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think we say, thank you very much. Like, we have to make a decision, right? Or we're going to try to make a decision. So we're going to stop with public comment now, and we're going to deliberate as a group and see where we get to.
So would the 10 o'clock slot be a little bit more likely just for the community development team, as opposed to invited? So we would have, and that'll be a question from the agenda standpoint, as because I'll have to put the agenda together. That public input would appear at the start, before it gets started, after Mike does a summary of what's going on. What would be your thought?
I think that, I think like,
After,
yeah.
after Mike.
I feel like I feel like even in this meeting, we've articulated some pretty clear questions of like what we're trying to resolve, right? Of like, are we comfortable with the rec area right now? Do we know where we want the road to go? You know, what level of specificity do we need in the housing? And then if we just start with those kind of framing questions and Mike Willard runs us through the history of this project and how we got to where we got now and what are the site limitations that might inform our thinking in answering those questions. If he could bring the entire group, meaning us and the public that's there, to that point, then we can pause, get public input, and then we can stop the public input and talk amongst ourselves in front of the public and deliberate.
Whoever wants to stick around, yeah.
Because I think
All
if
right.
we just have public comment at the beginning without any context setting from Mike,
Yeah, no, yeah, we have to, I think it has to be after Mike's input.
All right, so I think I'll keep whoever put this agenda together. I think I'll keep the outline of that agenda unless you guys want to make amendments to it. And then just kind of flesh out a little bit into the public input and feedback. I don't know if I'll keep the sub bullets, but we can keep the headers on it.
which
You know,
are we, what are we talking about? Are we talking about this agenda? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
This is the one that you and I worked on, Sal.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think I can just, because I'm gonna have to make an agenda to get posted as to what's going on. So we would basically be looking at 9 o'clock for a welcome and introduction. About 9:10, Mike Willard would do a review of the project process, get us all up to speed. By about 10, we would open it for public input and feedback, where we would have some invited guests and otherwise it's general public. That could take,
I think we should just cross off include invited guests, right?
Okay.
It's just public comment, and then like if Sal and I know people that are particularly interested in this issue who
we'll
we
make
think
sure
would
they're
be,
there, yeah,
just ask them to come
yeah.
because
And
they're
we'll
informed
we will-
citizens.
and we'll invite the community development team, or the
Great.
community development, the
The rec people.
community services.
Community services, yeah.
So that, yeah, then we have public input and feedback, lunch, and then subcommittee work session. If we got done early with public input and wanted to start subcommittee work before lunch, we certainly can shift that up. But that last section would be just the three of you, and whatever staff and manager help you want to help put that together with Mike. But for the most part, probably there just for more information in background, because I'm leaving it mostly to Mike Willard and his team to kind of lead you guys through that process. And I'm just more there as a fly on the wall if
So
there's a question or a need.
The only thing I'm unclear about is where the community services team is going to, where do they fit? Are they're, I mean, do we distinguish them from public input? I mean, it seems like, you know, they're a part of the city plan. They ought to, maybe they're part of the presentation, the sort of context that Mike is establishing. We have Mike, then we have community services, and then we have public input. Does that make
I
sense?
think that's great.
That sounds good. Yeah, we can do that. And if it's, again, all of this is up to your wishes. So if you want a community services person also in that working session in the afternoon, you're welcome to also, you know, it's a group that you are welcome to admit and not admit who you'd like to have in that for input.
Well, I mean, yeah, community services is a big part of what's going to happen up there. I think they should be involved in as much of the process as possible. I don't want to make them feel like that, you know, we're dictating terms to them. I want to make sure that they feel like they're heard and that we're taking their ideas into consideration.
I think that's great.
Okay.
So just to like sorry, just to say it one more time, Mike Wheeler does the introductions. He starts with a review of the project process and how we got here so far. Community Services then has a portion of the, I don't know how long of a presentation they want to make, but like talking about the recreation plans they've made thus far or how they're thinking about recreation at the site. Then we get the public input and feedback from whoever wants to provide it. And then, you know, assuming that it's not lunchtime, we go to a subcommittee working group that includes the Sal, Adrian, and myself, but then also key city staff, which would include, Kelly, I don't know if you're planning on participating in this, but like certainly or definitely Mike, and then, whomever from community services that, I feel like that working session is like the three of us, Sal, are responsible for making the recommendation, but we're going to have a conversation with staff to get to that place where we make the recommendation, right?
So when I'm thinking community services, I'm thinking of Arnie and Alex
Right.
Ellsworth and Arnie.
But yeah, could be Amy, but I would be
Could be
surprised.
Amy.
but-
Yeah.
Those are the three who are community. service.
Okay. Yeah. I think I agree with what I said and what you said. So
All right. Well, the
Well,
purpose of
sure.
this is to come up with our agenda for the public meeting. I think we've gotten there. So
Yeah, I think everything could be said has been said every way it could be said. So I think we're good.
all right, I will send out a draft agenda. I'll send it to all of three of you. And so that way we're, when we've got it, gets its final blessing before we get that posted. And then is there anything else? Oh, did we decide on a location?
I was just going to say, where is all this happening? Yeah. What's a
At first we were, kicking things around. We we're like, oh, what about, we could do it up at Country Club Road but then it's like, I know the internet is wonky up there and that might make it difficult to have the Zoom to work. So I think we might be here in the council chambers. If it's not special or spectacular, but what does work, we do have a nice big flat table.
Yeah.
We have access to the internet and
Well, I wonder I think it would be really, really helpful if we had slides available that we could look at if we did have it in like council chambers or wherever you're thinking, like downtown, like if we could have the different renderings, A, C, B, like pictures, you know what I mean? That we just have like a slide deck that we could refer to. Because to be honest, like having it at Country Club Road is appealing to me because we can literally go outside and look at it.
Right.
We can do that before the meeting. Like I can go out there but like I think really making sure that we have good visuals that we can all see and point to, I think will be really important and helpful.
yeah, I think if people think we can make it work out at Country Club Road, I think we still have the space out there. So we could try it. I just know the one time I had a meeting out there, that was the one thing was the internet could be a little funny at times because
Is that how the White and Burke meetings were done? Were they done via the web or were they done with a local computer projector or something? I can't remember.
They were done out, weren't they at Country Club Road?
Yeah,
They were, and they had a big screen but how did they do it? Was everything in the cloud or did they have a local?
Well, I still have Josh for one more week and I still have Chris. So let's say we shoot for Country Club Road as a location if you guys want that. And I will work to debug everything this week. If we can't debug it by Wednesday, which is the last day for making any change, so I'd actually by Tuesday night. So I'd have to make sure everything is debugged on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
Can I just sorry, I know I'm being wishy-washy here, but like I also just want to consider like, would we actually get better participation if it was downtown? Or maybe people will just come through the web. I don't know, right? I just want to like think about that too. Like there's advantages to being there and being able to point at the land, but there's also advantages to like maximizing the number of people that participate in the meeting.
There probably won't be that much pointing at the land, frankly.
Yeah, it'd be more pointing at the maps, maybe.
I think, yeah.
So maybe we just have it downtown and point at the
Yeah,
maps.
maybe that's the easiest thing, and you don't have to troubleshoot. And we don't have to change the location if things go wrong.
All right, sounds like a plan. We've got a date, time, and agenda. I will get a draft out Monday so you guys can take a peek at it before we get it all posted. Any
Great.
other questions?
Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday.
Yeah, thanks. I guess we're adjourned.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you, Seth, for
Yeah.
returning. All
Thanks. See you guys.
right,
Thanks,
have a good
folks.
one.
Sorry for the delay.